the book for today, Ambi Parameswaran. His book For God's Sake being launched, and we have Mr. Prakash Iyer, our special guest, unveiling the book for us. May I please request you both to take your places on the dais.
This book wouldn't have happened but for Prakash Iyer's introduction to Anish Chandy, who's the publisher somewhere in the back. I had done my thesis and I was wanting to convert my PhD thesis into a book, and I was looking for a publisher to do that. And I met Prakash. Actually, I emailed him. I said, look Prakash, can you give me an introduction to Penguin? And before I could hit the send button, Prakash had written a kind of a eulogistic email to Anish, and the next day Anish Chandy was sitting in my office and he said, no thesis can be made into a book, sorry. If you want to sell, if you want to write a serious book, take a year off and do a very serious book, or based on this book, on this thesis, let's talk. So we talked for about almost an hour and a half, and he said, okay, this sounds interesting. And I told him, the first story I told him was the story of the missing Bindi, how in television advertising Bindi has gone missing, and why is it gone missing, and how I done some work to try and find out where it went and how it disappeared. And he said, yeah, this sounds interesting, so why don't you write 2 chapters and send it to me, and I'll play it with the team and come back. And then finally I got it right, and then he said, fine, let's go ahead. And he said, what's the name? So I had a name which he said was not good, and he had rejected 3 names I suggested. So I was talking to Nitya and son Aditya. We were in San Francisco, and so I said, I need a name. So Nitya said, what about For God's Sake? So I said, that sounds interesting. So I noted down my little booklet which I carry. I said, For God's Sake is an interesting title. And interestingly, we were at that time crossing the road in the Mission District of San Francisco. Mission District was named Mission District because that is where the first Spanish church was set up in the west coast of US. So Anish said, yeah, title is good. And then and then I started writing, and I kept every story. There are a lot of stories there. Most of them are based on real facts. Some of you in this audience are featured in the book. Some names I have masked because I didn't want them to come and hit me. Most of the stuff, 90% of the stories there are true. So I'm happy that we're doing this formal launch. The book has been available. Excerpt has appeared in many papers. I've heard some good reports from people who read it. So I'm grateful that all of you are here. God bless all of you. All of you would have got a small packet, which is really the prasad from the Siddhi Vinayak. Okay, it's really the prasad from Siddhi Vinayak. And Mr. Kapoor has asked me to tell you that you need to buy 2 copies of the book in order to really ensure that the Siddhi Vinayak blessings come to you.
I thought you'd aim much bigger and you say actually 7 is the auspicious number for the day. And you might as well go for it when you're going. I just want to start by saying, it feels funny to be given so much credit for a book. It's a bit like, I feel like that the car parking attendant outside Wankhede Stadium, who says, Sachin Tendulkar became a great guy because, he was looking for Wankhede, and I was the guy who told him that's the way to get there, Without me, where would this man have been, Yeah, so that's exactly how I feel. But Ambi, I must ask you this. This is, for most people, a book launch becomes special because it's the first book and all of that. And for you, this is, 6 books later. How different do you feel about this one compared to, those heavy textbook kind of things you wrote earlier?
Good question, Prakash. I think the way we can change this country is by empowering the youth and
Ambi, yeah, go on.
Sorry, wrong program. Sorry, wrong program. Well, I've written other books. Those are all largely serious kind of books, which are case studies and stuff like that. So this is really the first time I've written a book which like I said, when someone takes it home, the lady of the house grabs it and says, I want to read it. Nitin Karkare, my colleague, took it home, and his mom, who's 78, right? She grabbed it and said, this looks interesting, and she's been reading it, and
Yeah, but interesting. No shades of grey on this one, but you still think women read a lot of it?
Yellow, my friend. Yellow as well as grey.
No, but that brings us to a more serious question, and something that Ambi addresses in this book. Are women generally more religious in India than perhaps men are?
Well, again, I'm tempted to talk about women empowerment and all that, but I will listen. Okay, there is a myth that women in India pray a lot more than men. Okay, but in reality, when you look at data, research data, men and women almost pray. They pray to a similar extent. They go to temples around the same number of times. They pray the same number of times. But unfortunately, in our country, the status of women is not as good as, and now I'm talking seriously, I'm not talking for a television channel, please. So, and if you go back in how women have been treated in this country, and I think I've written about it here, is that I think during the Vedic time, which is probably 2000 BC, women were allowed to learn the Vedas, they were allowed to perform pujas. But it was around 500 BC that Manu wrote his book, Manu Smriti, which is Laws of Manu. That's when he kind of forbid women from studying, forbid women from learning. So they became illiterate, and they were supposed to be vehicles of procreation. And so, in a sense, I think women of India have not come out of that as yet. They're still fighting for getting equal rights. So women in India do pray a little bit more, but not substantially more. They should be praying a lot more. And I think we need to blame Manu for a lot of the problems which women of India have suffered.
So Ambi, why don't you tell us, simple one, I want you to flash back to the day when you're shooting that Santoor commercial, and you've got that young lady, and you talked about the Bindi and the role of the Bindi. So why don't you try and tell us a little bit more about how you see the Bindi and what it's actually been doing in India, as it were.
Well, Bindi is interesting, and this really happened. Because we were doing this film in '94, we wanted to make that Santoor woman who was still then, we used to show her in a sari and in a wedding kind of a setting. We were taking her out, and we were making a film where she was doing aerobics. And it took us quite some time to convince the client to kind of allow us to do it, but we did it. And the film, first edit had come, and I saw it, and then that night I kind of woke up in cold sweat, and I suddenly remembered that not only was she not wearing a sari, which she can't, but she's doing aerobics, but she was not having a bindi. So I said, we've not given her a bindi. And she's a mother. There's a little girl who comes and says mommy to her. Now, how do we handle it? So then I caught hold of the film head that time, Monia, and said, look, Monia, I think we may have to put a bindi on her forehead. Those were the days when this technique called rotoscopy, where you actually take still images, you can insert in moving pictures. So today it's common in all your, a lot of the things is entirely kind of rotoscope. So she said, yeah, we can do rotoscopy, but really want to do it? I said, look, I don't know. Then we talked to a lot of people around, and people said, look, she's doing aerobics, it doesn't really matter whether she has a bindi or not. And then we kind of let it pass, and we presented the film to the client, and it went through, it did it phenomenally well. And interestingly, I had sent a copy of the book to our client, Vineet Agarwal. So he called me, and he said, if you're worried about the bindi, how come you didn't tell me? So I said, that's why I'm the agency. I'm supposed to worry for you. You're not supposed to worry about these things. Right? So that started the question, look, where are the bindis gone? So we actually looked at 50 years of television advertising. We looked at 30 ads every decade, or 5 decades, and said, look, are companies using bindi, not using bindi? Yeah. Why? And then we found that actually the use of bindi, if you remember, Lalita ji, so 30 years old, had a big red bindi. Right? and she was dressed in a sari.
Yep.
Okay. So from then to now, the use of Bindi has dramatically gone down. The use of sari in advertising has dramatically gone down. And
It's making a comeback in the movies, I'm told.
No, Bindi.
Particularly with the rain.
Yeah. No, in movies, even lungis are making a comeback. Right?
Tradition strikes back. Yeah.
No, but so I was discussing this with an ex-colleague, boss of mine, about this Bindi, and he told me an interesting factoid again. In India, you will very rarely see a Muslim lady wear a Bindi. But do you know that in Bangladesh, all of them wear Bindis? And even in Pakistan, Bindi is a fashion accessory. So a lot of women in Pakistan wear a Bindi. So this Bindi thing was interesting, and that I think is one of the chapters.
Yeah. So there's something else that kind of strikes me, and I think Ambi has a lot of examples of how people do things which would suggest that there's an element of religion playing out in their decision making. So Ambi, I was curious, how much of our behavior is linked to religion versus, let's say, superstition, or this general belief in luck? This bit about I went to the temple and then I got admission one day, and therefore now before everything big I go back to the temple. So it's not so much because I believe in necessarily the power of the Lord as much as in the ritual. I did something which was lucky, and I'm going to repeat that. Is that something you find in your research and in the work you've done?
Well, this is an old fundamental question which was raised by Pascal. It is known as Pascal's wager. I've written about it. It says that should you live your life as a non-believer or should you live your life as a believer? Okay. And you can have two outcomes. You die and you find there is no God, then you're okay. Or you die and you find there is God, okay, then you regret it. Shit, I should have lived a clean life. So I think most Indians are not willing to take the Pascal's wager. All of us are betting it safe, saying, look, you believe as if there is going to be God, and therefore you kind of live a life in a particular way. Now, this is not the forum, but I don't know enough about real theology and spiritualism, etc., etc., etc. But the fact remains that in the late 20th century, there was a school of thought in Europe which said that religion and God belief will die. Max Weber said that, Nietzsche said that, and Karl Marx said that. And they said that with scientific thinking, that we've discovered gravity, we've discovered light, we've discovered electricity, and we've kind of answered all the big questions. So why should anyone still worship God? Why should anyone still believe in religious rituals and things like that? So they actually postulated that religion will go away. It's not going to go away.
Yeah.
It's going to completely go away. So, I was talking at a forum last month, and I was sharing this with a Swamiji, interesting chap. So he said, look, apparently someone heard Nietzsche speak in Germany, and he went and wrote on a wall, God is dead, Nietzsche. Okay. And apparently a few years later Nietzsche died. So someone went and wrote behind, under that, Nietzsche is dead, God. Right? So God, this whole thing about, do we believe in God because it's just luck, it's a Pascal's wager, we don't want to take it, right? Or is it that we really think there is, I would like to err the other side. I think there is something we believe, something good about it, and that's why we do believe, in God. And you talked about the fact that people think it's good luck. Do you know there is a temple in Hyderabad, outside Hyderabad? It's called the Visa Balaji. Okay. Apparently, if you go and pray in that temple, your chance of getting a US visa is high. Now,
if you pay 1,001, actually chances get better, I'm told.
Yes. You do that visa puja, it improves. But the fact is, if you're a young man, 22 years old, you've just done your engineering, and then you're going to be sent to America, and you're going to appear for a visa interview, will you really take a chance not to go to Visa Balaji?
So I have a question for you, Ambi. I've often, I guess in the corporate world and in life, we all try and say, you've got to take it in your own hands. If it is to be, it's up to me. Don't blame it on someone else. So I sometimes worry, do you think there's a danger that this entire area of linking it to God and religion can be somewhat, I won't use the word regressive, but is there a fear that people will start saying, what do I do? Instead of studying another hour for the exam, let me go and spend an hour in the queue at the temple, because that guy might actually make it for me while I may not be able to make it. So is there a danger of us blaming it on that poor man who's busy anyways these days?
Yeah. No, I don't have an answer for that. But what was it? This guy went and complained to God that you didn't make me pass. The God said, at least you should open the book. You didn't even open the book. Come on, open the book. So so I think it's complicated. The answer, should you really study and not waste time standing in the queue? And at that time you could have actually studied 2 more chapters. I don't know, but I think we as Indians do see religion in many different shades, and that's what is interesting about the whole subject.
So let's have a quick show of hands. How many of you over here have bought a house in the recent past and looked at Vastu before making that decision? Show of hands, please. Okay, how many of you are honest for the day? Come on. Okay. So, good point. So I think Ambi has an interesting take on this entire area of Vastu and how that might actually work and how,
Yeah, in fact, Vastu is actually an old, kind of Hindu science of building temples, right? And then from temples you go to, houses, right? According to the Vastu science, the center of the house has to be open to the sky, right? So if all of you live in apartments, the middle is not open to the sky, you need to make a hole. But the truth is today, a lot of us use some Vastu consultant and who kind of gives you some basic stuff on, kitchen should be here and bedroom should be there and the grain should be stored in this place, and then we think it's Vastu compliant. But in fact, Vastu is again a bit like the Visa Balaji, right? So all of us are, in a sense, Visa Balaji worshippers.
Or the Pascal wager again.
Yeah, exactly.
So
again, we don't want to
take a chance.
And can you imagine, millions of flats are sold in this country without any Vastu compliance certificate. Right? Vastu has become popular just now, just about 10 years.
But that's something else that's interesting, and one would have thought that religion is what your grandfather and or that generation took very seriously, and many of us went to school and college and didn't really get too much into religion. But from what I understand from your book, in a sense, religion is actually making a comeback, and you talk about, let's say, religious tourism as an example to say that maybe there's more of it happening today than perhaps ever before.
That tilt happened with Ramayana and then Mahabharata and then kind of the whole. And today we are seeing a lot more of religion around us than we would have seen in the last 10-15 years. You go to any airport, I'm amazed that every single state tourism board advertising temples, right? And I didn't know that in Karnataka there is some called Belligare, which is supposed to be a Buddhist, monument. So every, so if you take tourism, it's 40-50% is religious tourism. You look at our festivals, we are kind of unearthing new and new festivals. There's Akshay Tritiya, which is an unknown festival, has suddenly become very big, and you're being told you should buy a car because Akshay Tritiya, you should buy gold coin because Akshay Tritiya. And my mom told me Akshay Tritiya is the day of giving. That's the day Krishna actually extended his helping hand to Draupadi when her sari was being pulled off. So that's a day of giving, whereas you converted technically a day of giving into a day of buying. It's consumption meets religiosity.
And there are lots of very interesting little snippets in this book. And for instance, I didn't know, we always knew that India got freedom at midnight, and there's that famous, Nehru speech about when the world sleeps, India shall awake. So how many of you know why is it that you had to actually have a speech with 15 minutes to go to midnight for a country to become free? Why did they do it? Do you know? Ambi apparently tells me, and I'm guessing this is true, that 15th August 1947 was not an auspicious date. So while that was the date agreed for India's independence, they wanted to actually go through the thing very quickly. and therefore before midnight.
Yeah. In fact, the British had decided it will be 15th August because 15th August is the day the Japanese surrendered to the British. So they said, we'll give you independence only on 15th of August, not a day before. Okay, sorry. And 15th August 1947 was fixed. And India, we didn't have a choice. We were colonized. So we agreed to 15th of August, and then we discovered that the Hindu astrologers said 15th of August is a bad day. Okay, any country born on 15th of August will break up. So, we had great leaders then who found a way out. So they got hold of this famous astrologer called Kemp. So Kemp said, listen, 15th is a bad day, but what if the Constituent Assembly meets on 14th? So the Constituent Assembly kind of gathered on 14th of August at 11:30 in the night. Okay, and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru got up at 11:55 to deliver his talk. So as a result, in our religious tradition, we booked 14th August as our Independence Day. Brits can have their 15th, it's okay.
And if you're a cricket fan and if you wondered why Pakistan gets all the fast bowlers, maybe now you know. 14th August is when they became independent.
Yeah.
So maybe it works after all.
We know so little about our own religion, let alone other religions. Which is why I think one of the chapters I've talked about how should management schools have something in this area of religion and cultural studies. Okay, and in fact, I am Calcutta, our Board of Governors chairman is here, Ajit. In fact, I am Calcutta, the only institute I think of in the world which has a center for human values, which is set up by Professor S.K. Chakrabarty. And the whole idea is, there is something called human values. Is it necessary for you to kind of communicate this with MBA students? And I don't think we're doing enough. I don't think we're doing enough, and our country is going to become more and more multicultural. Okay, and I don't think we're preparing our young management graduates to understand the nuances of religion and how religion and culture and can help them play a better role as managers. Okay.
Thank you very much. And to Ambi, wishing you all the very best to this book and many, many more. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for him as well.